My name is William. I live in the United States of America. In a previous life, I was just an ordinary man, a worker in a packing plant, with no great ambitions beyond doing my bow and going home at the end of the day. I had a simple vision of happiness, a stable job, a home, and someone to love and share my life with. And for a while, I thought I had found it all. I fell in love with a woman named Geraldine, and with her came a boy, her son Nikolai. For 7 years, we lived a stable union based on the belief that love was enough, without the need for paperwork to prove our connection. In the beginning, everything was perfect. We were a family, or at least that's what I thought. Little did I know that, behind the scenes, there was a dynamic that, from the very beginning, never truly accepted me, and that this dynamic would one day cost me my peace, my money, and ultimately give me the freedom I didn't even know I needed. Our 7-year story began with the lightness of new love, but the first 2 years were the culmination of an illusion I barely knew I was living. I was 31 and Geraldine was 30 when we decided to live together. Geraldine and I shared a life, a home, but we didn't share a vision of family. From the beginning, Nikolai, her son from a previous relationship, was a shadow hanging over our union. He was only 11 when we moved in together, and his resistance was as palpable as his aversion to me. He never accepted me as a stepfather, nor did he accept his mother's new life. To him, all of this was just a brief interlude in his family's history, a temporary error that would be corrected. He believed, with a naivete that broke my heart, that one day his parents would be reunited. Our home, which was supposed to be our refuge, was a silent battlefield, filled with the presence of a boy fighting a war I didn't even know existed. I tried to reach out, to be a good example, but his rejection was a wall too high to scale. I hoped that, in time, he would accept me, but his refusal was a constant reminder that I was an intruder in their lives. I remember one particular Saturday morning that captured the essence of our dysfunctional dynamic. I had woken up early, despite it being my day off, to prepare a special breakfast. Pancakes, bacon, fresh orange juice, the works. I wanted to surprise them, to create a moment of bonding. The aroma of coffee filled the kitchen as I arranged everything meticulously on the dining table. When Geraldine entered, her eyes widened with surprise. "What's all this?" she asked, a smile playing on her lips. "Just something special for my family," I replied, my heart swelling with hope. She kissed my cheek, and for a moment, everything felt right. Then Nikolai trudged in, his eyes immediately narrowing at the sight of the breakfast spread. Without a word, he grabbed a plate, scooped up some food, and headed back to his room. "Nikolai," Geraldine called after him, "William made this breakfast for us to eat together." He paused at the doorway, not bothering to turn around. "I have homework," he muttered, disappearing down the hallway. The disappointment must have shown on my face because Geraldine quickly touched my arm. "He's just going through a phase," she assured me, but her eyes didn't meet mine. "He'll come around." But he never did. And that breakfast became a symbol of our relationship, my efforts, his rejection, and Geraldine caught in the middle, always making excuses, never addressing the real issue. Time, which once seemed like an ally in my attempt to build a family, became a silent enemy. When Nikolai turned 18, the childish naivete I once saw in him disappeared, replaced by a cynical arrogance. He felt like the master of the house, the lord of a territory that, in reality, was mine. Years of Geraldine's pampering had turned him into a parasite, a dead weight who wanted nothing to do with life, even though his academic intelligence was undeniable. He was a dedicated student, yes, but this dedication seemed to shield his indolence toward everything non-academic. I tried to impose limits, small rules of coexistence, but it was like trying to hold back a flood with my bare hands. Geraldine always came to his rescue, undermining my authority, discrediting me in my own home. I tried everything: peaceful conversations, attempts at dialogue, proposals for family activities. But Geraldine's response was always the same: "He's my son, leave him alone." Her voice was a concrete wall that prevented me from connecting with the boy, from teaching him to be a responsible man. I was the provider, the breadwinner, the pillar of the home, but I had no right to impose any rules of conduct on anyone living under my roof. Frustration built up, day after day, drop by drop. My patience, once inexhaustible, began to fray. The situation exploded one afternoon. I came home from work to find the house in a state of chaos. Clothes, food wrappers, and trash strewn everywhere. And there, in the middle of the mess, was Nikolai, stretched out on the couch, watching TV, completely oblivious to the world around him. A spark of irritation ignited within me. This wasn't just irresponsible behavior. It was disrespectful. A demonstration that my presence, my work, and my home meant nothing to him. Without saying a word, I walked over to the television and turned it off. The silence that followed was heavy and tense. Nikolai looked at me, his brow furrowed, an expression of pure petulance on his face. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice thick with irritation. "I'm teaching you to be responsible," I replied, my voice firm and controlled. "This is my house, and you need to respect the rules." His response came quickly, full of venom. "I'll tell my father everything, and we'll see if you're really that manly." The words hit me like a blow. He was appealing to the authority of his biological father, whom I had never met, as a way to threaten me. That man, absent and irresponsible, was his hero, his point of reference, and I was merely the intruder. Anger rose in my throat. "You can say whatever you want, Nikolai," I said, my voice full of conviction. "I'm not afraid of your father." He stood up, approaching me with a defiant stance. "Are you going to hit me? Is that what you're going to do? My mother will know everything." At that moment, I knew he was a coward, a spoiled brat who used his mother as a shield. He didn't confront me directly, but he threatened me with the authority of his parents, the only ones he seemed to respect. As if summoning his protector, he shouted, "Mom, did you see what happened?" Geraldine, who had been in the kitchen until then, appeared in the living room with a serious expression. She knew exactly what was happening, having heard every word of our confrontation. "Yes, I saw," she replied, looking at me with a disapproving look. "William, what does this mean? I expect an explanation." My voice lost its angry tone and became serious. I needed to be clear, to make her understand the gravity of the situation. "I just want Nikolai to be responsible. This is my house, and he needs to respect the rules." Geraldine looked at me with a contempt I'd never seen in her eyes. "He's my son, William. Only I can set limits and correct him. Nikolai is not your son." Those words were more painful than any blow. The feeling of being a stranger in my own home, of being disowned in front of my stepson, was a crushing weight. I wasn't a father to Nikolai. I was just the provider, the man who supported the household. I felt invisible, as if my presence were only to meet a financial need. "Then I can't correct or set limits," I replied, indignation rising in my voice. "But I'm forced to keep them, like two parasites sucking my money." Geraldine's expression changed from contempt to indignation. "It's not like that. You have an obligation to keep us. Yes, if you wanted to have us in your life." Those words froze me for a moment. Obligations. It wasn't a partnership. It wasn't a family. It was a contract, a transaction. I was the ATM, and they were the bills to be paid. The revelation hit me with the force of a punch. Geraldine's face fell, and she continued, her voice thick with resentment. "Neither I nor my son are parasites. I have my obligations in this house, and I fulfill them." She fulfilled her obligations. She cooked, washed, cleaned. But who was she serving? Herself and her son. I was the only one there without a voice or respected authority. My role was simply that of provider, supporting a family that never truly accepted me. That confrontation wasn't about the TV or the mess. It was about my place in that house, a place I thought I'd earned with love and dedication, but which, in reality, had never belonged to me. That night, the flame of my love for Geraldine began to fade, and in its place, a bitter sense of betrayal and loneliness began to grow. After that argument, the air in the house became so thick it was difficult to breathe. Geraldine and I avoided each other, and Nikolai acted as if nothing had happened. The silence was a form of punishment, and I felt like a prisoner in my own home. Trying to break the ice, Nikolai appeared in the living room, his expression oscillating between disinterest and insolence. He looked at his mother, completely ignoring me, and said, his voice a little softer than usual, but still with the tone of someone demanding something, that he needed money to buy a few things. Geraldine, as always, didn't hesitate. She nodded, promising to give the money, but then turned her eyes to me with a smile that seemed forced, almost theatrical. Honey, she began, and the words sounded strange, as if it didn't fit in her mouth. Our son needs money. Give it to him. Our son? Not our son or my stepson. It was always her son, as if she and I were a team, but the truth was the only team there was her and Nikolai. I felt the irony of that phrase eating away at me. And there he was, looking at me with a gleam in his eye I couldn't quite decipher. It was the anticipation of someone who knows they'll get what they want. The arrogance of someone who holds the power over the situation. With a serious look on my face, I took my wallet out of my pocket. I had enough money to last me the rest of the week. And when I took out the money, Nikolai didn't hesitate. He took the wad of bills, took out almost everything, leaving just enough for 1 or 2 modest meals, and with a mocking smile said, "Thank you, William." He didn't call me father or uncle or anything that might denote affection. Just William, the coldness of a name that made me feel like a complete stranger. Then he gave Geraldine a quick kiss and left the house, leaving me alone with my indignation. I stood there, my wallet nearly empty, watching him walk away. Geraldine approached, and I felt an arm wrap around my shoulder. "Don't be like that, love," she said, her voice trying to sound comforting. "He's just a boy. He has the right to defend himself." The sentence shocked me. Defend himself from what? From a man who supports him, who gives him shelter and food, who tries to set limits. As if the pain in my chest could be cured with sugar, she smiled and said she'd make a pie to calm things down. I just nodded, unable to say a word. I stuffed my indignation deep inside my soul, burying it somewhere I hoped it wouldn't hurt anymore. That night, I lay awake beside Geraldine, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events in my mind. The casual way Nikolai had taken my money, the dismissive tone in his voice when he thanked me, the look of satisfaction on his face, and Geraldine defending him, always defending him, no matter what he did. I turned my head to look at her sleeping form, her chest rising and falling with each breath, unaware of the turmoil inside me. 7 years together, and I felt like a stranger in my own bed. The next morning, I left for work earlier than usual, unable to face either of them at breakfast. The packaging plant was my sanctuary, a place where I had value, where my work mattered. I threw myself into my tasks with a fervor that caught the attention of my colleagues. "You okay, William?" one of them asked during our lunch break. "You're working like a man possessed." I forced a smile. "Just trying to get ahead," I replied, not wanting to burden them with my domestic troubles. A week passed. I was at the packaging company as usual, focused on my work, when my boss, a man who had always treated me with respect and consideration, called me. He said someone wanted to speak with me. This was an unusual moment. Who would be looking for me at work? He politely asked the person to come in, and that was when my life turned upside down again. Nikolai stood in the doorway, his expression completely different. He was no longer the arrogant, mocking boy from the previous week. He looked sad, dejected, with the face of someone carrying the weight of the world. My first reaction was compassion. What had happened? "What happened, Nikolai?" I asked, feeling a pang of worry. He approached, his voice low and humble. "I came to apologize for the way I behaved last week." He paused and his voice softened. My parents' separation made me very sad, and I was acting on that sadness. I just wanted my family back. His words disarmed me. I had buried my hope, but in that moment it began to resurrect. Perhaps I thought he was finally maturing, understanding that the world didn't revolve around him. He seemed so sincere. "How can I help you?" I asked, the humility of his posture making me forget all the hurt. He looked at me, his eyes brimming with tears. "I need help with my high school graduation. The party is in another city, and I have expenses for the outfit, the flight, and I just want my family to be together for my graduation. That would make me so happy." I thought about the fund I'd saved for our future. I had a good amount of money saved, the result of years of hard work, of extra nights at the company. Money I was saving for us, for our lives. I thought about Geraldine, about Nikolai, about the life I wanted us to have. I have some money saved, I said. I can share, don't worry. Don't bother, he replied with a humility that took me by surprise. No, I insist. I want to help, I said, and my sincerity was total. I wanted to prove that I was a part of the family, that I was the pillar. What happened next was a dream come true. The joy in Nikolai's eyes was genuine. He hugged me tightly, full of gratitude. I will be so grateful to you, William, he said, the words coming from the bottom of his heart. My mother and I are blessed to have you in our lives. As we embraced, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was the connection I had yearned for, the acceptance I had sought for so long. I held him at arm's length, studying his face, searching for any hint of deception. But all I saw was gratitude and what seemed like genuine affection. We'll make it a special day, I promised. Your graduation should be perfect. He nodded eagerly, and for the first time since I'd known him, he seemed to look at me not as an intruder or an ATM, but as a person worthy of respect. It was a heady feeling, this newfound connection, and I savored it. He left the company with a smile that filled me with peace. My boss, who had seen the scene from afar, approached me, a wide smile on his face. What happened, William? You look so happy. Finally, my boss, I replied with a sigh of relief. Nikolai seems to have accepted me. Finally, we are a family. My boss smiled, and I knew he was rooting for me. I was at peace, believing that, finally, life would give me the happiness I'd always sought. But poor William, little did I know that that hug and those words of gratitude were just the prelude to a terrible stab wound. I went home that evening with a lightness in my step that had been absent for years. Geraldine noticed the change immediately. You seem different, she remarked as we prepared dinner together. Did something good happen at work? I couldn't contain my excitement. Nikolai came to see me today, I told her, watching her reaction carefully. He apologized for his behavior and asked for help with his graduation. A flicker of something, surprise, concern, crossed her face before she composed herself. Oh, that's unexpected. I thought so too, I admitted, but he seems sincere. I think he's finally coming around. She nodded, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. That's good, William. That's really good. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in our home shifted. Nikolai was polite, even helpful at times. He engaged in conversations at dinner, asking about my day, sharing stories from school. Geraldine watched these interactions with an expression I couldn't quite read, a mix of apprehension and calculation. With a month of preparation, I dedicated myself to making that graduation the best day of Nikolai's life. I bought Geraldine the most elegant dress, one that would enhance her beauty, and I paid for Nikolai's graduation attire. I wanted them to feel loved and valued. I was investing in a family, in a union that seemed to finally be coming together, and everything seemed to be going well. Peace reigned in our home. But unfortunately, life is not a fairy tale. Things don't always turn out as we imagine, and soon I would pay a high price for my naivety. But fate is wise. That pain would be the catalyst for a learning experience I would never forget. It would be the most painful lesson of my life, but also the most valuable. Nikolai's graduation was my beacon, the event that would unite us all, making me once and for all the man of the house. I had invested my time, my money, and most importantly, my hope in that event. I bought the best suit for Nikolai and the most elegant dress for Geraldine. I wasn't just paying for clothes, I was buying a place in their lives, a place I thought I had earned. The day before the graduation, I caught Nikolai and Geraldine huddled together in the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones. They fell silent as soon as I entered, exchanging glances that made my stomach tighten with unease. Everything okay? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Fine, Geraldine replied quickly, too quickly, just discussing last-minute details for tomorrow. Nikolai nodded, his eyes avoiding mine. Yeah, just details. I wanted to believe them, desperately wanted to trust that the connection I thought we'd been building was real. But a shadow of doubt had crept in, and it would prove to be prophetic. The afternoon arrived. My heart pounded with anticipation. My boss, who was in my car taking care of some work, smiled at me, sharing my happiness. Life seemed perfect. I drove home, eager to get ready and go with my family to the ceremony. But as I approached, a scene stopped my car, and for a moment, my heart. On the sidewalk in front of my own door stood Geraldine and Nikolai, and beside them, Nikolai's father. That man, the ghost of the past, the figure Nikolai used as a weapon against me. They talked, laughed, and the familiarity between them was like a knife piercing my chest. It was a family portrait, but I wasn't part of it. My boss looked at me, and I could feel the shock in his eyes. I rolled down the car window, confusion overwhelming me. I smiled, trying to break the ice. What's he doing here? We're already getting ready to go together. I'm already in the car. It was Geraldine who shattered my illusion with the coldness of a sword. She looked at me with a contempt I'd never seen before. The smile she'd given me a month earlier, Nikolai's hug, it all seemed like a lie. You're not invited, William. This is a family event. My legs trembled. Her words hit me with the force of a punch. I turned to Nikolai, trying to find an explanation, a trace of that humble boy who had hugged me. But Nikolai, you told me you wanted your family back together. I paid for everything, your suit, your mother's dress. The glint of joy I'd seen in his eyes a month earlier was replaced by an icy coldness. He looked me up and down with an arrogance that sickened me. I wanted my family back together. My father and mother. Not you, my insufferable stepfather. Those words weren't just knives. They were blades of ice that tore through my heart and soul. The pain was physical. I felt the betrayal in every fiber of my being. Nikolai's father, the man who never invested anything in his own son, who was never there for him, and looked at me with a mocking smile. It's about time he understood, isn't it, Geraldine? I begged, my eyes filling with tears. I begged Geraldine, the woman I thought I loved. Geraldine, please reconsider. I can't believe you're doing this to me. Her response was the final straw. She looked at me with disdain, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. Don't throw a tantrum, William. Everything will be back to normal in a week. We'll be back in a week. Don't worry. She said goodbye with an ironic goodbye, an act that made me feel like a complete idiot. And the three of them, the family I so desperately wanted to have, got into Nikolai's father's car and drove away, leaving me alone, devastated, humiliated in front of my boss. Shock paralyzed me. I couldn't believe what had happened. The biological father, who hadn't invested a cent, was the hero, the guest of honor. I, who had paid for everything, was the intruder. Anger rose in my throat, a blind fury I had never felt before. My boss, who had witnessed the entire scene, stepped out of my car and approached me. His face was a mask of sympathy as he placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. William, he said softly, I'm sorry you had to go through that. I couldn't speak, couldn't form words through the lump in my throat. My boss guided me back to the car, gently pushing me into the passenger seat while he took the wheel. We drove in silence for a while, me staring blindly out the window, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. Finally, my boss broke the silence. I've seen this before, William. Women who can't let go of their ex-husbands, who use good men like you as a safety net while they wait for a chance to reunite with the father of their children. His words penetrated the fog of my shock and pain. I turned to look at him, seeing the wisdom and experience in his eyes. You deserve better than this, he continued. You've given them everything. A home, financial security, stability, and this is how they repay you, by humiliating you in public? My silence was answer enough. He nodded as if confirming something to himself. I know it hurts now, but this might be a blessing in disguise. It's shown you their true colors. Now you can make decisions with your eyes wide open. My boss hugged me, his voice full of compassion. He told me he was sorry, that he knew what it was like. He gave me wise advice, talking about how separated women, especially when they're still attached to their ex-husbands, can be a curse. He told me not to let the pain consume me, but to use it as fuel to move forward. And I, with the pain of betrayal consuming me, decided that was the last straw. I would no longer be the ATM, the invisible provider. The first thing I did, on my boss's advice, was to remove all of Geraldine and Nikolai's belongings from the house. I was no longer going to support two parasites. Next, I canceled Geraldine and Nikolai's credit cards. The money I was saving for Nikolai's college fund was transferred to my own account. And then, the hardest decision, I would sell the house. I knew that legally, the house was mine. Geraldine and I weren't even officially married, and everything was in my name. I could do whatever I wanted with my assets. And luckily for me, it wasn't difficult to find a buyer. A family, a father, a mother, and their 2 children, a boy and a girl, who wanted a home of their own. They fell in love with the house and paid a very good price for it. The sale was quick, and I made sure to move all my things, my furniture, my clothes, my computer, everything that was rightfully mine. As I packed up my life, memories flooded back. The early days with Geraldine, when everything seemed possible. The small moments of connection with Nikolai that had given me hope. The dreams I had for our future together. Each item I packed was a piece of that dream, now shattered beyond repair. But amidst the pain, there was also a strange sense of liberation, as if I were shedding a skin that no longer fit. The new family came to view the house one last time before closing. They walked through the rooms, exclaiming over features I had once loved, now planning their own life in this space. The wife, a gentle-looking woman with kind eyes, noticed my melancholy. "It must be hard, leaving a home with so many memories," she said softly. I managed a smile. "It's time for a fresh start," I replied, surprising myself with how much I meant it. As for Nikolai and Geraldine's belongings, I ordered them to throw them all in a dump. I no longer held any regard for them, their lives, or their memories. They had humiliated me, and I would do the same with their belongings. My revenge would not only be financial, but symbolic. And before I left, I wrote a letter that would give me my final breath of revenge, a way to ensure they felt the weight of their actions. I asked the new couple to deliver the letter to a woman and a young man who would be visiting the house in a few days. They promised they would do as I asked. With my boss's help, I moved to a city far away. In the new city, I was no longer the William who had been betrayed. I was a new man, free from ties, free from parasites. I decided it was time to invest in myself. I enrolled in university to pursue my dream of becoming a doctor, a dream I had given up when I got together with Geraldine. Now I was free from the dead weight, the anchors that weighed me down. Nikolai's graduation in the other city was their party. My new life would be mine. In my new life, peace was my companion. The silence was a relief, and the absence of chaos was the soundtrack to my freedom. I was investing in myself, in my future, and the energy I expended on studies and work was infinitely more rewarding than that expended on ingratitude. Still, curiosity was a flame that burned silently in my chest. I needed to know. I needed to know what had happened when they returned from graduation. I called my former boss, my true guardian angel, to get the news. I felt like a father figure, a friend who reached out to me when I needed it most. He answered, and his voice sounded like a messenger. "William, my friend, you have no idea. It was like the world had collapsed on their heads." Nikolai's graduation behind them, they returned home. But it wasn't their home anymore. The first shock was when they realized the locks had been changed. Confused, they tried to get in, but were prevented. Geraldine, Nikolai, and their biological father, who was still with them, were perplexed. It was then that the new owners, the couple who had bought the house from me, came out to see what was happening. Geraldine, furious, asked who they were and what they were doing in her house. The new owner, with the calm of someone who knew they were in the right, explained that the house was theirs, that they had bought it from me, William, the real owner. He told me that Geraldine and Nikolai turned pale. They couldn't imagine something like this was happening, my former boss told me, his voice dripping with irony. They thought you were incapable of doing something like this, that you were their ATM and that you would always be there for them. And then the new owner of the house, fulfilling my promise, handed them the letter I had written. My boss told me that Geraldine and Nikolai's eyes scanned the lines, and as they read, indignation and nervousness grew on their faces. I smiled, imagining the scene. The pain they felt in that moment, though not my intention, was the justice I needed. And the content of the letter was as follows. "Geraldine and Nikolai, you had the right to have your family together, yes, but I'm tired of being seen as an ATM which only maintains two ungrateful, blood-sucking parasites who only gave me scraps of their affection and crumbs of love. I'm tired of being invisible. I sold the house because it's mine and everything was in my name. If you think you can sue me for abandonment, you are wasting your time because we're not legally married, neither before God nor men, and our union was just something stable. And you, Geraldine, you disappointed me immensely. You disenfranchised me in my own home, supporting your son's bad parenting and never allowing me to correct him. You always came up with this line that I wasn't Nikolai's father. Very well, I was saving up a college fund to put him through college. But because of your betrayal, I realized neither of you deserve my support. You were just a hindrance, and I'm free of you. And you, Nikolai, do you love your biological father that much? Then stay with him now, because my life is about to begin, and yours is about to fall apart. For I am free of the dead weight and useless burden I was carrying around for nothing. You and your mother, good luck with your new life, because I'll be gone, and I'll prioritize myself. Goodbye. The anger, the shock, the humiliation. My boss told me that Geraldine screamed, throwing the letter to the floor, her face red with fury and indignation. She said I couldn't have done that to them, that it was cruel and heartless. Nikolai, in turn, exclaimed to his mother that I wasn't a suitable person and that it was all revenge, a tantrum on my part for not being invited to his graduation. They refused to accept the truth, to see the reality of the situation. They couldn't believe their ATM had turned against them. My boss told me they were shocked by the letter's contents, especially the part where I referred to them as parasites, leeches, dead weight, and useless burdens. Nikolai's father simply watched the scene, wordlessly, like a coward who didn't want to get involved. That was the price of ingratitude. They had sown the seed of betrayal, and now they were reaping the fruits of my contempt. My boss also told me that they went to the dump, hoping to find some of his things. I didn't care if they found them or not. My revenge was already complete. The image of them scrabbling through trash, searching for their belongings, gave me a satisfaction that was almost shameful in its intensity. But then I remembered the look on Geraldine's face when she told me I wasn't invited to the graduation, the cold dismissal in Nikolai's eyes, and the shame vanished, replaced by a righteous vindication. What happened to them after that? I asked my boss, curiosity getting the better of me. He chuckled, a sound that conveyed both amusement and disdain. They turned to Nikolai's father, of course, expected him to take them in, to be their new provider. But he wasn't having any of it. He's remarried now, did you know? His new wife wasn't exactly thrilled about having Geraldine and Nikolai move in. I hadn't known that, but it didn't surprise me. Nikolai's father had never struck me as the type to take responsibility for his actions, let alone for the well-being of his ex-wife and son. So where are they now? I asked. Last I heard, they were staying with Geraldine's sister. Temporary arrangement, according to her, but it's been months now. Nikolai's struggling to find work. Seems his academic intelligence doesn't translate well to the real world. And Geraldine, well, she's bitter. Tells anyone who'll listen how you abandoned them, how you stole their home, and left them with nothing. I nodded, processing this information. Part of me felt a twinge of guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by the memory of my own pain, my own humiliation. They made their choices, I said finally, and I made mine. My boss agreed, his voice warm with approval. And you made the right one, William. You're building a life for yourself now, a real life. That's what matters. Time passed, 5 years later, 5 years that I dedicated to myself, to my peace, to my dream. I graduated with flying colors, with top grades and the best performance. My former boss congratulated me, and I hugged him, thanking him for everything. He was more than a boss. He was a true angel in my life. The 5 years that followed my release were the most productive and happiest of my life. The anger of betrayal, the pain of humiliation, all became a driving force behind my success. I dedicated myself to my studies and my career, and became a renowned doctor. My fame grew with my innovations and my talents. I was featured on the cover of a medical journal, an achievement that filled me with pride, and that would one day bring me a new kind of challenge. The hospital where I worked was a temple of healing, a place where pain and hope met, and that's where I met her. Jane. She was a nurse, a woman of beauty that wasn't limited to her appearance, but emanated from her soul. She loved her profession with enthusiasm, with a strength of kindness that captivated me from the first moment. She was the opposite of Geraldine in every way. Geraldine was arrogant and opportunistic. Jane was humble, kind, with a heart so big and loving that she made me believe in love again. Our love story was built on a foundation of mutual respect and admiration. We shared passions, dreams, and ambitions. And after 2 years of a romance that fulfilled me every day, I knew she was the woman of my life. I no longer wanted to postpone my happiness. I proposed. She, with tears in her eyes, accepted. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. But there was a part of me that felt compelled to be honest. I didn't want my life with Jane to be built on lies or half-truths. I wanted her to know me completely, to know my past and be able to choose whether or not to move forward with me. That night before the wedding, I sat her down next to me and started talking. I told her everything. I told her about my past life, about Geraldine and Nikolai. I told her how I was a simple man who believed in love, and how I fell in love with Geraldine, a woman who seemed perfect, but who had a shadow over her life. I told her about Nikolai, about his rejection, his lack of respect. I told her how Geraldine undermined me in my own home, treating me like a mere provider. I felt the pain of those memories, but I kept talking, my voice firm but filled with emotion. I told her about the betrayal at Nikolai's graduation, about how I had paid for everything, only to be humiliated and left behind. I told her about my revenge, about how I sold the house and sent their things to a landfill. I told her about my letter, about the words I used to refer to them, and about how I moved to start over. I finished speaking, and a heavy silence filled the air. I looked at her, my heart pounding with fear. What would she think? She looked at me with compassion and love, but also with a glint of admiration in her eyes. Jane, I said, you are free to go. I will not bind you to a past that is not yours. If you want to leave, I will understand. She smiled, and her smile was like a sunrise. William, this doesn't change anything between us, she said, her voice calm and sure. What you did was protect what was rightfully yours, and you did the right thing. If Geraldine and Nikolai did this to you in a common law relationship, imagine if you had gotten married. She could have stolen everything from you, and maybe even tried to go back to her ex-husband. And if I were in your situation, I would have done the same thing without hesitation. Her words filled me with relief and love. She didn't judge me. She understood me. She accepted me. In that moment, I knew my life finally had direction. With a hug and a kiss, we sealed our relationship. I had found my soulmate. Our wedding day was one of the happiest of my life. The joy of everyone who loved us was there present. My former boss, my true friend, was there smiling and rooting for our happiness. On our honeymoon, we gave ourselves to each other, body and soul, and the result was the greatest joy I could have known. Jane became pregnant. The news filled me with a kind of happiness I'd never felt before. Geraldine never wanted children with me. She said Nikolai was enough, that an extra child would be an unnecessary burden on our lives. But with Jane, it was different. It was true love, a true child, the fruit of our love. Our son was born, and he was beautiful. I held him in my arms, and my life finally felt complete. We named him Andrew. Jane and I were a family. We had each other, and we had our son, and that was enough for us. But one day in the hospital, when our son turned 1, something unexpected happened. The ghosts of the past, the ones I thought were behind me, would resurface. I was at the height of my happiness. My life was complete. I had a career I loved, a wife who loved me, and a beautiful son, the fruit of true love, our little Andrew. That day, Jane and I were in the hospital reception. Our life was a happy routine of work, family, and love, with our little Andrew by our side. That was my paradise, but suddenly, hell decided to visit us. 2 ghosts from the past suddenly appeared, Geraldine and Nikolai. They stood at the entrance, looking lost and desperate, but their arrogance was still palpable. I didn't have time to react. Geraldine saw me kissing Jane, and her fury consumed her. She came toward me without hesitation and slapped me across the face. A dry, humiliating sound echoed through the reception area. How dare you cheat on me with a shameless woman after everything you've done? She screamed, her voice filled with hatred. Jane, who was unlike Geraldine, didn't hesitate. She turned to Geraldine with fire in her eyes. Who do you think you are, hitting my husband? She yelled back. He's my husband. He left me with nothing and ran away. Geraldine screamed, lies and manipulation dripping from her mouth. I composed myself, the pain of the slap replaced by cold fury. We were never officially married, Geraldine. Our union was just a stable one. And after what happened at Nicolas' graduation, I had every reason to do what I did. I was the man of the house, the provider, and you humiliated me in front of my boss. And how did you find me after almost 10 years of not seeing each other? Nikolai, as always, came to his mother's rescue. Does that answer your question? Nikolai threw the magazine on the floor where I was on the cover and immediately said, You became a famous and renowned doctor. You graduated with the college fund that was meant for me and perhaps with part of the proceeds from the sale of our house. Thanks to that magazine, we ended up in this city where you fled. You were my mother's husband. Your obligation was to support and provide for us. The magazine I was on the cover of, so that's what revealed my location. And it was better that way. It was then that Jane, my lioness, intervened. She looked at the two of them, and the truth I had written in the letter came out of her mouth like a prophecy. Now I understand why William had reasons to abandon you. You truly are nothing more than parasites, leeches, and useless cargo. Geraldine and Nikolai were offended. This is a family matter. Stay out of it, they shouted. William is my husband and the father of my son, a real son, born in wedlock, before the law, God and men, and not a borrowed son like Nikolai. Jane replied in such a strong voice that the entire reception stopped to listen to her. The tension in the air was palpable like electricity before a storm. Patients, doctors, nurses, all stood frozen watching the drama unfold. Andrew, sensing the hostility, began to cry in his stroller. Jane immediately moved to comfort him, all while keeping her fierce gaze fixed on Geraldine and Nikolai. Nikolai, defeated by Jane's words, lashed out at me again. I never imagined such inconsideration from you after reading your letter. I admired you, yes, but in my own way. And you're selfish for wanting to be the center of attention, for wanting my affection. You know what, William? If my mother and I were leeches, then you're a selfish person who only thought of yourself, wanted to be the center of attention, and that's why you did all this. I want you to know, William, that I will never forgive this humiliation. You sold our house without consulting me, even though we weren't married. You robbed me, humiliated me, and I'm sure you had someone's help to do it, because you couldn't have done it alone. Tell me who it was, Geraldine said, her voice a mix of hatred and resentment. I laughed, the irony overwhelming me. It doesn't matter who helped me, Geraldine. What matters is that this person opened my eyes to you and Nikolai. And thank God I didn't marry you or adopt your son. Because you could have been real thieves. I don't regret what I did. And if I could, I would do it all over again. You can't imagine the relief I feel not having two useless burdens and dead weights on my shoulders. I wanted a real family, not freeloaders, who only gave me the leftovers of their affection and crumbs of love. And Nikolai, with a blind smile, said, And are you proud of that, William, of having left your family on the street? Anger made me speak. You called me unbearable at graduation, Nikolai. But the biggest disappointment was your mother. She didn't even bother to defend me when you humiliated me. A woman who doesn't defend her husband from the humiliations of her own son is useless and worthless. Geraldine defended herself, as if she had a point. That doesn't justify selling the house and leaving us on the street. We could have resolved all this between us and within the family. Tried couples therapy, family therapy, anything. You wasted 7 years because of a graduation you weren't invited to. I prefer this new life I'm living now than those 7 years of crumbs of affection and scraps of love you gave me. I'm happy with a real family, a real wife and a real child. Not with two freeloaders like you and your son, I replied firmly. It was then that Nikolai did the unthinkable. He hit me with the most vile words possible. Jane is nothing but a homewrecker and a whore, the mother of a bastard child. Your mistress and your Playboy bunny." At that moment, I lost control. The fire in my eyes turned into a blaze. My family was being insulted, attacked. I showed no mercy. I landed a hard punch to Nicolay's face, making him stagger. And then I unleashed a series of blows, mercilessly and without mercy. Geraldine screamed, trying to stop me. "Stop it, William! You're going to kill the boy!" she screamed, desperate. "He's not a boy at all. He's a man, a spoiled monster who never knew any boundaries," I yelled back. "It's your fault, Geraldine. If you hadn't been so irresponsible, if you don't control your son, he'll end up badly one day." Nicolay's fate would only be two: jail or the cemetery. These words left Geraldine shocked and completely speechless. Blood streamed from Nicolay's nose, spattering onto the pristine hospital floor. His eyes were wide with shock. He had never expected me, the man he had always seen as weak and compliant, to fight back with such ferocity. Security guards rushed towards us, alerted by the commotion, but they were too late to prevent the damage. Jane called hospital security, who forcibly removed Geraldine and Nicolay from the premises. They screamed and struggled, but they stood no chance. I went to the bathroom and washed my hands, cleaning Nicolay's blood. As expected, Geraldine and Nicolay reported me for assault, but I had witnesses, my doctor friends, nurses, and the security guards who saw everything. With the help of lawyers I paid, Jane and I obtained a restraining order against them. They couldn't come within 500 meters of us. If they did, they would be arrested. The aftermath of the confrontation was chaotic. The hospital administration called me in for a meeting, concerned about the violent incident that had occurred on their premises. I explained the situation, the years of manipulation and abuse I had endured, the sudden appearance of Geraldine and Nicolay after nearly a decade. My colleagues vouched for my character, testifying to my professionalism and gentle nature. The hospital decided not to take disciplinary action, recognizing that I had been provoked beyond endurance. Fearing reprisals, Jane and I hired 3 security guards to protect our son and the other children in the hospital daycare. Sketches of Geraldine and Nicolay were distributed throughout the city. Realizing they had no power in my new city, they returned to our old one, where it all began. Nicolay was scarred, his face swollen, his pride wounded, and Geraldine continued to wallow in her resentment, still believing she had a right to be supported by cooking, washing, and cleaning. They wallowed in their own bitterness. Jane and I were happy. Our family was complete. We had the support of everyone who loved us. I learned that it's in adversity that the people you truly love are by your side, not those who are self-serving and profiteering. As the years passed, the memory of Geraldine and Nicolay faded, becoming nothing more than a distant shadow. Jane and I went on to have another child, a daughter we named Lily, completing our family circle. My career flourished, and I eventually opened my own medical practice, dedicated to providing care to those who needed it most. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about the twists and turns my life had taken, the pain that had led to joy, the betrayal that had led to true love. And in those moments, I would look at Jane sleeping peacefully beside me, at the photos of our children on the nightstand, and know with absolute certainty that everything had happened exactly as it was meant to.